Welcome to week 11 of Harvey's Huddle. I'm Jackson Harvey. Got a great show planned out for you today. Gonna go through my top 10. And then we're gonna also preview all 14 of the games on the slate for week 11. Wow, week 10 was amazing, wasn't it? Lots of unexpected turnouts and great gameplay. I'm excited to talk about each team that's on the slate this week and hopefully give you some fantasy advice along the way. Also, thanks for anyone who asked questions on my Instagram page at Harvey's Huddle. Gonna address a couple of the questions that were asked there. First on the slate, we're going to go through my top 10 teams in the league. At number 10, I've got the Miami Dolphins. They're still a good team. They had a good win against the Chargers this last week. Nothing really else to say. I don't think they're as good as the other top 9 teams in the league right now, but they're still good and they're sticking around there. At number 9, I got the Indianapolis Colts. They really not manhandled, but they took care of business against the Tennessee Titans on Thursday Night Football. A really good win. Phillip Rivers threw for over 300 yards again, and the defense looks solid again after kind of a bad outing against Baltimore. At number 8, I've got the Baltimore Ravens. They're dropping again on my list. Last week I had them at number 6, but here I have them number 8. Even though Lamar played a pretty good game, it doesn't look like he's getting any help. He led the team in rushing. He made the throws that he needed to. His receivers weren't able to catch most of them. So I have him at falling to number 8. Hopefully they can show up this week, and if not, they could fall out of a playoff spot really soon and fall out of the top 10 teams in the league with one of the better quarterbacks in the league at the helm and a pretty good defense as well. At number 7, I got the Seattle Seahawks. They seem to be on a downward spiral, and if they can stop it in time, they can salvage a pretty good season for them. Russell Wilson's turning the ball over way too much. He had another 3 turnovers on Sunday. The defense can't stop anyone, and they kind of looked almost like a one-trick pony against the Rams on Sunday, as Jalen Ramsey all but shut down DK Metcalf for the entirety of the game. At number 6, I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had a good all-around win against the Panthers on Sunday. Tom Brady threw for 3 touchdowns, and they just looked good again. We'll see if they can keep that up, but right now I've got them at number 6. Number 5, I've got the Green Bay Packers. They were really close to losing to Jacksonville, and Jacksonville had 2 touchdowns called back for offensive holding penalties, so they were really close to losing. And in my opinion, if Devontae Adams hadn't come back into the game in the second half after a brief injury departure, they probably would have lost, because Adams did score their game-winning touchdown, and Rodgers isn't getting any help from anyone else really. So that was kind of a scary game for the Packers, but they managed to squeak out a win, and hopefully they can do better this week. At number 4, I got the Arizona Cardinals. That Cardinals-Bills game was excellent. In fact, at number 3, I have the Bills still. But these two teams just went at it, and Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins also cost me my fantasy matchup against my wife of all people, so thanks a lot for that. If you were playing against Diggs and Hopkins, that was about a 15-point swing in a minute, which really annoyed me. Anyways, I think the Bills are still a better all-around team. They played really well on Sunday despite losing. The Cardinals, of course, won on the game-winning touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins. That play was just Aaron Rodgers-esque in terms of Hail Marys. And you'll be seeing that on any top 10 list of Hail Marys for years to come. Kyler Murray falling out of bounds, just whipping it to DeAndre Hopkins in triple coverage. Ugh, it was pure poetry for the Cardinals there. But I really think that both of these teams are very good and very in very good position to take control of their conferences even. The Bills, of course, they've been playing well the last few weeks, and the Cardinals have beaten the Bills, who are one of the top teams in the AFC, and the Seahawks, who are one of the top teams in the NFC. So we'll see how both of these teams do. The Bills are on a bye this week. Cardinals play the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. And keep an eye out for those two teams because they could be a little annoying for some of the top tier teams in both of their conferences. At number 2, I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers. They took care of business against Cincinnati. The only reason I don't have them as number 1 is because the number 1 team is really good. But if they can take care of business against the Jaguars and Ben Roethlisberger can throw the ball like he did on Sunday, I think they could be in a number 1 spot for me again, but we'll see. At number 1, I got the Chiefs. I didn't bring them down a notch. They were on a bye week, so we didn't see them play last week. We'll have to see how they do against the Raiders this week. Raiders, of course, gave the Chiefs their only loss this season and have the only interception thrown by Patrick Mahomes. So we'll see how the Chiefs do this week, but I think they're a great all-around team. Only real weakness is their run defense, which we'll talk about later in the episode. There you have it. If you have anything that you would add to that top 10 list or any positions that you would change there, hit me up on Twitter at Harvey_Huddle or Instagram at Harvey's Huddle. And I'll post your comments as well, so let me know that. Now we're going to go into the previews of all 14 games on the slate this week. This is a really awesome week this week. I'm really excited to watch 3 amazing primetime games. We'll talk about them towards the end of the episode, but really good matchups, and there's also really bad matchups to counteract that. But I'm really excited for some of these games on the slate. First, we're going to talk about Cincinnati versus Washington. This game actually, believe it or not, has huge playoff implications. I was completely wrong about the football team and the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know what I was thinking, but both those teams lost on Sunday. Washington had a tough loss against Detroit. They, of course, lost on a 59-yard field goal kicked by Matt Prater to end the game. Alex Smith didn't have any passing touchdowns, but he threw for 390 yards. I think that's a solid start, considering that's his first start since almost dying. So, awesome game by Alex Smith. Needs to find the end zone with some of these talented receivers that he has, but Antonio Gibson had only 45 rush yards and 2 touchdowns, and their defense didn't force a single turnover, which is kind of odd. They have a pretty decent defense, especially in terms of pass defense. They're number 1 in the league when it comes to passing yards allowed. Washington has the 4th fewest pass touchdowns in the NFL with 9. They're tied for the 6th most rush touchdowns allowed with 12. And like I said, they've allowed the least passing yards with 1,752. Cincinnati, on the other hand, they looked terrible against Pittsburgh. Burrow threw for 21 for 40, 213 yards and a touchdown. The team ran for 139 yards total, which is pretty average. The offense lost 2 fumbles as well on the game, and overall this season, the Bengals have the 3rd lowest rush touchdowns allowed with 7, but they tie for the 2nd most pass touchdowns allowed with 21. So I'm going to take Washington here. I think Chase Young's going to be able to sack the quarterback with that awful Cincinnati offensive line. I think he'll have at least 2 sacks, maybe more. Alex Smith should be able to take advantage of a bad Bengals secondary. He'll throw for at least 2 touchdowns, again, maybe more. I think Washington takes this one 28-16. Next up, we've got the New York Jets taking on the LA Chargers. Two bad teams going at it. Doesn't really have any playoff implications at all. If anything, it has draft implications. Flacco, the last time the Jets took the field, he played awesome. They almost beat the Patriots. In fact, I think they should have beat the Patriots, but bad coaching really lost the game for them. Chargers are playing okay. They haven't been able to close out these really close games, and that's why they have the record that they have. Herbert, last game he threw for 20 for 32, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Again, this game doesn't really matter. It has no implications whatsoever except for the draft. It's the New York Jets who find a way to lose everything versus the Chargers who find a way to lose everything. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of viewers for this game. LA, they have a better all-around game. They've got a better quarterback, I think, in Herbert right now. They've got better receivers. They've got a better running back, even though nothing's really worked out for them. I think the Chargers win this 30-10. If you have Keenan Allen sitting around on your bench or for some reason sitting on waivers, pick him up. He should be able to play really well against a really bad defense. And Flacco might even be able to throw a lot to his receivers as well. He was able to do it against a Patriots secondary that is pretty decent. So if you have any of the Jets receivers or maybe even a tight end, throw them in there. See if they can do something. Next up, we got the Detroit Lions taking on the Carolina Panthers. This is a pretty important game, especially for the Detroit Lions. They are still in the wild card hunt. I think they're only a couple games behind. So Stafford was solid in their win against Washington. He threw 24 for 33, 276 yards, 3 touchdowns. And Swift added 81 yards rushing and a reception touchdown. The Lions right now, they allow the 8th highest average passer rating at 99.6, and they allow the most rush touchdowns at 16. Carolina's had it a bit rough. They were blown out pretty much by the Buccaneers. It doesn't look like Christian McCaffrey is going to be returning this week. He didn't practice on Wednesday. Matt Rule has said he is optimistic that McCaffrey can play on Sunday, although I don't think he will. Their defense, Carolina's, allowed 210 rush yards and 2 touchdowns in the loss to the Bucs, including a 98-yard touchdown ran by Jones. Bridgewater, in that game against the Buccaneers, he was 18 for 24, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and threw an interception. And Mike Davis only had 32 yards on the ground. That was, again, against a good rush defense in the Buccaneers, who really stepped it up. Both these teams, they don't really have a good defense, especially when it comes to the running game. However, if McCaffrey comes back, we could be seeing pretty much a showdown between Swift and McCaffrey. I don't think it'll make a difference if McCaffrey's there or not. I think Carolina can take this one, 34-24. Next up, we got the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. In recent years, this has been kind of a good game. Of course, Jacksonville beat the Steelers 3 times in the 2017 season. Since then, it hasn't been too good for Jacksonville, but Jacksonville really played physically against a good Green Bay Packers team and came within a couple of holding calls to winning that game. And so look for this maybe to be an upset possibility on Sunday. I don't think it will, but Jacksonville has historically, again, the past few years, played well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh really took care of Cincinnati easily. Roethlisberger, he was the offensive player of the week in the AFC, and he did everything that he did. He threw for 3 touchdowns. He threw all over the Bengals without a single practice that week. Of course, he was on the COVID list for the whole week. He was finally cleared on Saturday. He came on Sunday, didn't need anything to do with a practice session, and absolutely torched the Bengals defense. I think this guy is a possible MVP. He definitely should be in the conversation right now with the way he is leading his team. He's got 2,267 yards passing, 66.8 completion percentage. He's thrown 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and his average rating is 102.8. So he's been really showing up this year after last year's injury that ended his season early. The Steelers defense has 36 sacks, which is number 1 in the NFL, 11 interceptions, which is tied for number 2 in the NFL, an average opposing quarterback rating of 79.2, which is second lowest in the NFL, and their defense allows an average completion rate of 56.2%, which is first in the NFL. This is an elite defense. This is a defense that can really close out games in the first quarter, especially with the Steelers' offense producing so many points each game, and they seem to just have threats all over the field. I think this is going to be a bloodbath. I don't really think Jacksonville is going to be able to contain Claypool, Smith-Schuster, and any of the other receivers on the Steelers, especially with Ebron out there. I think Jacksonville hasn't really played well against tight ends this season, so it's going to be a bloodbath. Terrible offense, mediocre defense for Jacksonville, and I think you'll even see a defensive touchdown with Pittsburgh here. Luton, he played okay against the Packers on Sunday, but he's making bad decisions, and this defense is really good, so I imagine either a pick six or a fumble recovery for a touchdown. If you have the Pittsburgh defense anywhere, play them. They're going to be getting a lot of points. Pittsburgh wins this 40-7. Next up, I got the Cleveland Browns taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Once again, I was so wrong about the Eagles beating the Giants on Sunday. The Giants took it to them and won pretty handily. Wentz only went 21 for 37, 208 yards, no touchdowns. And the team, they had 2 rushing touchdowns and 150 plus rush yards, which is pretty good. This team's terrible. This division is terrible. It's an all-around disappointment. I really think that the NFL should consider a playoff adjustment. In the Canadian Football League, what they do is if there's any teams that have a worse record, or any division leader that has a worse record than someone in a different division that has a no playoff spot, that better record team takes over that playoff spot. It's called a crossover. You can look it up on Google. It's a really cool rule, and I think it really helps out with competitiveness in the playoffs. This is probably going to be the second season in a row that we see the winner of the NFC East having a losing record. Meanwhile, look at the NFC West, for instance. They have 3 teams at 6-3. Look at the NFC South. They have the Saints and the Buccaneers 1-2 with much better records than they do. Even in the NFC North, you've got the Vikings, who aren't even 500 but still have a better record than all of these teams. And you've got the Lions, who they also have a better record than the Eagles right now. So maybe potentially a possible change of rules in the playoff structure there. I think it should happen, but I'm also not an executive in the NFL, so let them make those decisions. Browns really won a sloppy game against the Texans on Sunday. The weather was terrible. This is their second game this season. I think second game in like 4 weeks that they've had just awful weather conditions going against them. They won 10-7. Mayfield threw 12 for 20, 132 yards. The real story of that game, though, and I said it last week, Kareem Hunt has had better outings when Nick Chubb's on the field, and it happened again. Chubb had 126 yards and a touchdown, and Kareem Hunt had 104 yards added onto that. That's a great duo. Great backfield weapons there. This game is easy for me to call. I'm going to take Cleveland. They're going to really beat up this Eagles team. 30-10 is my prediction. Next up, we got the Falcons taking on the Saints. As far as I saw in an article I just read, Sean Payton's pretty quiet on whether or not Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston's going to be starting on Sunday. This has been a question I was asked quite a lot on my Instagram as well. Who is going to play? With of course, if you haven't heard, Brees, he had a few broken ribs and a collapsed lung from a hit taken on Sunday's game. I personally think that Peyton will probably use both Winston and Hill. He did that when Brees went down on Sunday, and it could really happen again. I think he's genius for not naming his starter yet. Make Atlanta have to plan for two completely different quarterbacks here and really screw up their game planning in that way. I think that's very smart for Sean Payton to do, and I think it's going to be an advantage in this game, no matter who he picks. In my opinion, who would be better if you had to pick between the two? I would personally say Taysom Hill should get the nod. I think that he throws very well. Of course, he has a running threat added to him, which is very prevalent in most starting quarterbacks in the NFL now. These new young guns, they can get it done on the ground. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, these quarterbacks that are coming in have the running ability, and Taysom Hill definitely has that. On top of that, I really think that it's a good opportunity to get a look at what Hill can do in a starting position. Drew Brees doesn't really have a lot of years left on him, and you're going to have to look for your quarterback of the future eventually. You've had Hill in a great pocket knife sort of position for the last few years, being able to do a little bit of everything for you. Why not give him a chance against a pretty bad Falcons team and see if he can really get it done? I think that's a really good idea and a really positive situation for the Saints to be in there. On the other end, I don't like Winston. I don't like him as a quarterback. He is turnover prone, and New Orleans really needs to put themselves in the best position to win this game, especially with Tampa Bay right behind them in the standings. So I think Taysom Hill should get the nod here. We'll see what happens. I'm not an NFL coach, but those are my thoughts regarding that. Matt Ryan on the other end of the ball, he's playing some really good football. He's third in the NFL in terms of yardage. He's got 2,746 yards, completion percentage of 67.2%. He's shown 15 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Their defense, on the other hand, for the Falcons, they've allowed 2,793 passing yards this season, which is number 2 in the NFL, second most. They've allowed 22 passing touchdowns, which is the most in the NFL, and they're allowing an average opposing quarterback rating of 105.6, which is the third worst in the NFL. So, again, no matter who plays quarterback for the Saints, the recipe and the game plan for the Saints is going to be get it to our MVP candidate in Alvin Kamara. He's going to be incredible. He's going to be able to run it all over these Falcons. I really think Hill should get the nod, and I think he will throw very well. Look for him to throw 250 to 300 yards and throw in a few touchdowns there. I think the Saints are going to win this one 30-17. Falcons, again, aren't a very good team. Their secondary is riddled with injuries, and so that's my reason. Next, we got the New England Patriots taking on the Houston Texans. Houston's continuing to disappoint this season. They only have 2 wins. They lost 10-7 in an ugly game again in Cleveland. Their rush defense is ranked 31st in the NFL. Their offense is mediocre. And they just look like they don't know what's happening to them. I would be shocked if I was a Texan fan. They came off of a really good season last year. Just to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins and have a disappointing running back in David Johnson. I haven't heard if he's going to be playing again this week. I imagine he won't be, considering concussion time usually takes 1 to 2 weeks. New England was impressive against Baltimore in a storm. If you didn't watch the game, I think the highlight of my watching that game was seeing Baltimore on their last drive, and you really couldn't see any of the players. That's how bad it was raining. It was a really, really wet game, but Newton threw the ball pretty well. 13 for 17, 118 yards and a touchdown. And this New England defense shut down one of the best running games in the league, only holding them to 115 yards, and Lamar Jackson was their leading rusher. So they also got an interception on Lamar. They have 11 interceptions on the season, which is tied for second most in the NFL. I think New England is an obvious winning team in this scenario against a really bad Houston team. New England's got this one 28-13. Next up on the slate, we got the miracle Miami Dolphins taking on the Denver Broncos. Tagovailoa, he got his third straight win with the Dolphins since he's been named their starting quarterback. He was 15 for 25, 169 yards, and 2 touchdowns in their win against the Chargers. I think in this game he's going to need to throw better so that teams can really see the Dolphins as real contenders. This is a solid team. I've been saying it the last few weeks. The Dolphins are a team to be reckoned with, and I think they have dark horse capabilities in the playoffs in the AFC. Their defense, they have 10 forced fumbles on this season, which is tied for the third most in the NFL. Locke on the Broncos side of the ball, he's week to week right now with a rib injury. On Sunday, he threw 23 for 47, 257 yards, a touchdown, and 4 interceptions. A lot of Broncos fans and Broncos analysts are asking if Locke really is the quarterback that the Broncos need. I'm not too sure. I don't usually go off of single game statistics like that, but Locke just isn't getting it done. He's not winning games. He's won one fourth quarter or second half comeback this season so far, but he just doesn't seem to be able to put his team in the position to win right now. So it looks like Brett Rypien's going to probably start. We haven't really seen him much, but he might be solid, might be not. We'll see what happens. Denver's run game is awful. They went out and got Melvin Gordon in free agency, and he only had 46 yards in their loss on Sunday. Locke, again, he's only thrown 1,497 yards this season. That's less than Dak Prescott, and he was injured 4 weeks ago. That's less than Gardner Minshew, and he was injured 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, take that what you want. I mean, Locke, I don't think, is the quarterback that the Broncos need right now. He's thrown 55% this season, and he's got 7 touchdowns compared to 10 interceptions. So, really, no, he isn't. I think Denver needs to get serious with coaching him up, maybe, and trying to find a run game so that the pressure can be taken off of him. He's throwing 47 times a game. You can't have that happen with a quarterback that's just not reliable right now. Miami's going to keep their winning streak in this game. I see them winning 34-14, and the Broncos continue their quarterback carousel. They'll probably bench Rypien in the halftime, and we'll see another quarterback, and they'll still look for their starting quarterback of the future after Peyton Manning retired years ago. Next up, we got Dallas taking on Minnesota. The curse has been lifted. Kirk Cousins fans can celebrate. Kirk Cousins won a Monday Night Football game, everyone. It is 2020. The impossible can happen. Kirk Cousins, went 25 for 36 on Monday Night Football, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Dalvin Cook only had 96 yards in their win, no touchdowns added. If you have any of these core Vikings players, obviously Cook, Jefferson, Adam Thielen, or even the Vikings defense, throw them in there. Find them on your waivers. Start them for fantasy football this week. Dallas is quickly falling apart, and you need to do all you can to win some fantasy matchups this week. Dallas, again, they're quickly falling apart. They're one of the worst defenses in the league. It looks like Andy Dalton's going to be starting this week. I don't see him playing well. He didn't play well in his last start, but we'll see. Again, miracles do tend to happen in 2020, so this Dallas offense has 20 turnovers, which is the second worst in the league. Another fantasy tip, don't play Ezekiel Elliott. This Minnesota defense on Monday Night Football, they stifled the Bears. I mean, it's the Bears. They don't really have the most prolific running game to begin with, but they really stepped it up, and I think they can step it up against an injury-riddled offensive line, and If you look at Zeke's last 2 starts, even 3 starts, he's had, I believe, 9 points, 8 points, and 8 points on the last 3 starts that he's had. So I wouldn't play Ezekiel Elliott. Don't give him the nod in a starting lineup position. It's easy for me here to pick Minnesota. 37-10 should be the score. It's going to be a blowout. It's going to be ugly. And look for maybe some coaching changes after this loss for the Cowboys. Although, again, they've been riddled with injuries, so that could happen. It could not. Next up, we got Tennessee Titans taking on the Baltimore Ravens. 2 teams, 2 disappointing losses on Sunday. This is a huge game for the Ravens and the Titans even, but Baltimore needs to win this in order to be able to stay in the playoff picture in the AFC. They need to win this. Tennessee and Baltimore, I believe they both have the same records at 6-3. And if Tennessee wins this one, they will probably make the playoffs over Baltimore. They'll have the tiebreaker, of course, but this is a do or die moment for both of these teams. Tennessee looked pretty sloppy against the Colts on Thursday Night Football. Tannehill went 15 for 27, 147 yards and a touchdown. In the last 3 games, Tannehill's only thrown 538 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he has a 54% completion rate. That is just terrible. And let me tell you a huge reason why the Titans did not win on Thursday Night Football. It is all on, in my opinion, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown had an amazing opportunity. He broke it loose on the sideline in the first drive of the game for the Titans. He had separation on the cornerback. He had the ball right in his hands over the shoulder, and he dropped it. And he continued to drop balls the entire game. You need your best receiver to show up in these really important games because now they're out of the playoff picture. The Colts are looking really good right now. They might not even win the division, the Titans. So these receivers, and if you're getting the nod to and the throws to you, you need to be able to make these catches and these key catches, because that one I just explained to you, AJ Brown's in the first possession of the game, it was going for a touchdown and you just flat out dropped it. And if he took the time to make those catches instead of blaming the refs for good coverage, in my opinion, by the Colts, they could have won that game. Their defense is pretty average against the run right now. They're tied for 5th most pass touchdowns allowed in the NFL with 20, and they're tied for the 3rd most interceptions in the NFL with 9. The Ravens, on the other hand, they struggled in rainy conditions in New England. Lamar threw the ball fantastically, and I have to apologize because I really didn't think Lamar would be able to do it last week, but he did amazing. There were so many drops by the Ravens wide receivers. Lamar went 24 for 34 on the night, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. And that's in the absolute pouring rain. And pouring rain is an understatement for the weather that was going on in New England. Where's Mark Ingram? I know he's short. We can lose him really easily, but where the heck is he? Why isn't he running the ball well at all? I haven't heard anything about him. I haven't seen him on any highlight tapes, really. What's happening with this Ravens run defense? They were stifled, or run offense. They were stifled by the New England defense. This needs to be a team game in order for the Ravens to win this. Lamar can't do it all. Lamar was their leading rusher in this game, and he threw the ball really well against New England. So some key questions that need to be asked is, of course, Derrick Henry on the Tennessee side of the ball. Are the Ravens going to be able to stop him? Can Tannehill play better? Can he throw the ball? Can his receivers catch the ball? This offense needs to get going in order for them to put up a fight against the Ravens. I think this comes down to the quarterbacks. I don't really think Tannehill is going to be able to pull it out and play better. So my nod goes to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. I think he's going to continue to throw well, and I'm taking Baltimore winning this game 28-20. Next up, we got our Thursday night football matchup against the Cardinals and the Seahawks. They last played a few weeks ago on Sunday Night Football, and it was an overtime thriller. The Cardinals took that one 37-34. The winner of this game is going to be the number one team in the NFC West. So this has huge playoff implications, especially since this is the last matchup of the season between these two teams, and the Cardinals have a chance to sweep it here. Russell Wilson, I've said it the last 2 weeks, and he has quickly fallen out of the MVP race with turnover after turnover after turnover. Seattle is also looking really exposed right now, especially on defense, and they, again, looked like a one-trick pony as Ramsey really shut down Metcalf, and the Rams were able to win the game against the Seahawks last Sunday. Wilson went 22 for 37, 248 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Russell Wilson was also their leading rusher with 60 yards on the ground, and he lost a fumble. 3 turnovers again by Wilson, 4 the previous week. That's 7 in the last 2 weeks, and that is unacceptable for a team that was looking really good at the beginning of the season, and they've quickly gotten 3 losses in the last 4 games. I really thought Wilson had it. I thought he was going to be able to play a complete season, and he's showing us that he just can't do it. We'll see if he's able to still make a Super Bowl run. They still have a pretty good team. They have an explosive offense, but they, again, were really exposed as some really good defensive play by the Rams stifled them and held them to under 20 points. Seattle's pass defense, of course, is number 32 in the league. They've allowed 3,180 yards through the air in this season. They're the only team right now who's allowed 3,000 yards after 10 games. And they've allowed 16 touchdowns through the air as well. Arizona, on the other hand, let's talk about their win against the Bills. That was electrifying. That I have not stopped watching that play, that final play against the Bills. Just incredible. Kyler Murray, he played pretty well. 22 for 32, 245 yards, a touchdown and an interception. He also added 2 rushing touchdowns and 61 yards on the ground. Kenyon Drake also had 100 yards on the ground added to that. Arizona's defense had 2 interceptions on Josh Allen. And this Cardinals team has the number 1 rushing offense right now. They have 1,520 yards through 10 weeks, which is first in the NFL. They have 15 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for first in the NFL. And they also have 5.3 yards per carry, which is first in the NFL. So I don't know if the Seahawks are going to be able to stop this team. If they're going to try to stop the run, Kyler Murray is going to make them pay for it by throwing it to Fitzgerald or Kirk or Hopkins through the air, especially with this terrible, terrible pass defense for the Seahawks. If they try to stop them through the air, Kyler Murray is going to make them pay for it on the ground. So I think this is going to be a little bit more of a one-sided game than their last meeting was. I see the Cardinals pulling this one off 28-17, especially with the way Seattle is playing. Next up, we got our Monday Night Football game. The Los Angeles Rams taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both of these teams are coming off of huge wins. Rams against the Seahawks, Buccaneers against the Panthers after a couple of dismal weeks and dismal showings. Brady played much better in their win against the Panthers. He was 28 for 39, 341 yards, 3 touchdowns, and even threw in a rushing touchdown there. Y'all are going to think I sound crazy, but I really think that the Buccaneers rush game needs to be better and continue to be better. Not only better, but they need to be consistent. Brady has 50% of their rushing touchdowns in the last 4 games. Tom Brady has half of their rushing touchdowns in the last 4 games. You need to be adding more scores on the run. If you take away the 98-yard rushing touchdown by Jones, he had 94 yards. Pretty good showing, but we just need consistency now. We need to see them do it in multiple weeks in a row. Their big four in the receiving core, Godwin, Evans, Brown, and Gronk, they each had 50-plus yards. Combined, they had 289 of Brady's 341 yards, and they had 2 touchdowns. They were also targeted 28 out of the 39 attempts by Brady, and out of those 28 targets, their completion rate was 75%. Incredible numbers. We really needed these top 4 receivers for the Buccaneers to show up this game, and they showed why they have one of the most talented core in the NFL. The Buccaneers defense is number 1 in interceptions with 12. They're number 2 in the NFL in sacks with 32, and they're number 2 in rushing yards allowed with 766 yards. And to add all that, they're tied for number 1 in the NFL in yards per carry allowed with 3.3 yards. On the other side, the Rams really took it to the Seahawks. The score was a little closer than what I think the game turned out to be. Jared Goff, he was 27 for 37, 302 yards through the air with 0 touchdowns. Little success for the Rams in the rush game. They had 106 yards, but they did have 3 touchdowns. They seemed to pass it, get into the red zone, and really rely on the run game in the red zone there. Still, with Jared Goff, how do you have no passing touchdowns against the Seahawks? That's something that you really need to take care of this week against the Buccaneers, and really pass it and get it into the end zone through the air. Their offense is tied for second most in the NFL in rush touchdowns with 14, and they've only allowed 13 sacks, which is tied for the 5th least in the NFL. On defense, you saw Jalen Ramsey. He really shut down DK Metcalf, and it made the Seahawks look like nothing. Their top receiver was gone. So that was huge, and I think Ramsey could be able to do it. Will the Buccaneers have too many weapons there? I don't know, but we'll see. Their defense right now is tied for 3rd most sacks with 31. They have the least passing touchdowns allowed in 9. They have the least yards per attempt through the air, 6.4. They're tied for 6th least rushing touchdowns allowed with 7. They're 5th least in rushing yards allowed, 871. And they have the lowest amount of rushes allowed of 20-plus yards, which is 1. And they've also allowed no rush attempts of 40 or more yards. This matchup is incredible. I think this is going to be a great Monday Night Football game to watch, a great way to end out this week. Will Brady have the protection he needs to make these big plays? If you remember, the last time he matched up against an elite defensive lineman was on Thursday Night Football against Khalil Mack. And we know how that went. That did not go well. Brady got hit almost every play. And the other question to ask is Goff going to be able to throw some touchdowns here? I think he should be able to. This is a hard one to call, but I've said it the last few weeks. I'll keep saying it over and over again until the day I die. Tom Brady cannot perform well if he's getting hit. And this LA Rams team is going to take it to Tom Brady against, in my opinion, a mediocre offensive line. I am going to take the Rams here. I'm going to say they win 27-17. Jared Goff, you need to find a way to score through the air or you won't win this game, but I think they're going to be able to do it. And again, I'm going to take them 27-17. Next up, we got the Packers taking on the Colts. This is another top-tier game. It's not a primetime game, but it's going to take place in the afternoon on Sunday. Green Bay nearly lost against a really bad Jacksonville team, which was surprising. Rodgers, he threw 24 for 34, 325 yards, 2 touchdowns. He added a rush touchdown in there as well, and he threw an interceptions. Again, in my opinion, if Adams hadn't returned in the second half after an injury, they would have lost that game. And that's kind of sad to say that the Packers would have lost to the Jaguars, especially how the Jaguars have been playing, and especially against a mediocre backup in Jake Luton. Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers need help. They need other receivers to be stepping up. Aaron Jones didn't even have a productive game like he usually does. So some of these receivers really need to take it upon themselves to get open or something. They need to do something to be more effective through the air other than Davante Adams. Their rush game also needs to be better. Indianapolis's rush defense is a top-tier defense. They're number 3 in rush yards allowed with 826. So who knows if they're going to be able to get anything done on the ground again. So again, they need these receivers to show up this game. Green Bay's defense only has 4 interceptions on the season, and they've allowed an average opposing quarterback rating of 101.1, which is the 6th highest in the NFL. Indianapolis, on the other hand, they played really well against Tennessee. Phillip Rivers threw 29 for 39, 308 yards and a touchdown. I saw them taking a lot of fourth down risks, which obviously paid off for them. However, I believe they went 50% on the night, 2 for 4 in fourth down attempts. Hines was solid. He had 115 total yards, 2 touchdowns total as well. The Colts had the 5th lowest pass touchdowns on offense with 11, and they've also allowed the lowest sacks in the NFL with 9. Their defense, on the other hand, they're tied for the 2nd lowest pass touchdowns allowed with 11. They're tied for 2nd most interceptions in the NFL with 11. And they have the 5th lowest completion percentage allowed, which is 62.2%. On top of all that, they're tied for the 3rd lowest amounts of rushes of 20 or more yards with 3. I think Green Bay is going to play better here, but this is a great offense in Green Bay against a great defense in the Colts. I think the Colts are going to be able to slow down Adams really well, and then Rodgers isn't going to be able to throw it to anyone else. Rivers and Hines should be able to play well here and continue the play that they had against the Titans on Thursday Night Football, especially with that extra rest. I think the Colts should be able to win this one 34-30 in a close game. Finally, we've got my favorite matchup this week, the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Last time these two teams played was in week 5 of this season, the Raiders taking that one 40-32. Vegas has been playing pretty decently since their week 5 win. Derek Carr, he went 16 for 25, 154 yards in their last game. On the ground, Josh Jacobs ran 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Booker went 81 yards with 2 touchdowns as well against the Broncos. This rush game is going to be huge again, but Derek Carr also in their week 5 win against the Chiefs had 300 plus yards. So we'll see what happens with their offense here. Carr in the last 3 or 4 games, he hasn't thrown for more than 170 yards. And so this Chiefs defense could really stifle him again. The Raiders defense had 4 interceptions on Sunday. They also have Mahomes' only interception in 2020 so far. So look to see this Raiders defense trying to make a huge play and some huge momentum shifting plays through the course of this game. The Raiders defense only has 11 sacks on this season. That's tied for the 2nd fewest in the NFL. And they also have the 3rd lowest completion percentage allowed, which is 61.5%. The offense, Derek Carr, he's only thrown 2 interceptions this season, which is the 2nd least in the NFL, only behind Kansas City. Kansas City's coming off of a bye week. Their last game was in a shootout against Christian McCaffrey and the Carolina Panthers. Mahomes right now is my MVP candidate for this season thus far. He's thrown 2,687 yards, 66.9% completion percentage, 25 touchdowns, 1 interception, and his average rating is 115.9. This offense for Kansas City has the 3rd highest pass touchdowns in the NFL, 25, the lowest interceptions with only 1, the 2nd highest quarterback rating on average, 115.6, and they're tied for the 5th lowest in sacks allowed with 13. The defense, on the other hand, they're 7th least in passing yards allowed with 1,941. They're 2nd least in pass touchdowns allowed, which is 11, and they're tied for the 5th most interceptions in the NFL with 9. Top of all that, they're tied for 4th most in yards per carry allowed with 4.8. This is going to be a very interesting game. Each of these rushing games on offense for both teams, they get about 4.5 yards per carry. Again, Derek Carr hasn't thrown more than 170 yards in the past 3 games. I don't really see Andy Reid coming out of a bye week and falling flat and losing. I think a well-rested Chiefs team is really scary. Some questions that need to be answered for this game. Who will have success running the ball? Is Kansas City going to step it up here on their defensive side of the ball? Are the Raiders going to be able to stop Clyde Edwards-Helaire? And can Las Vegas, of course, slow down Mahomes again? Can they get a couple turnovers off of him? If they can win the game. But I'm going to take the MVP frontrunner here. I'm going to take him any day, especially since Kansas City will most likely score early and score often. And that could force the Raiders to abandoning the run more than they want to and really rely on Derek Carr and the passing offense. I'm going to say that Derek Carr is going to throw at least 2 interceptions this game. Mahomes is going to have a 4-touchdown day, and he's going to get close to some NFL history here. The best touchdown to interception ratio in one season was accomplished by Tom Brady, and he had 28 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That's also the fewest interceptions thrown by a team in the NFL. The previous record was 5, and Brady broke it with only 2 interceptions on a season. Anyways, I'm going to take Kansas City here. I think they're going to win this one 36-20. I, again, don't see the Raiders being able to sweep Kansas City, especially a well-rested Kansas City on the primetime stage. So Kansas City should be able to take this one and retain the division lead for now. Well, there you have it. Those are my predictions. Overall, I'm 19-9 for these predictions on the last couple weeks since I started this podcast. Last week, I went 9 for 5. So take it what you will. Let me know what you think about these predictions. If you have any differing opinions, reach out to me on Twitter and on Instagram. And again, I'll post your answers. I'll get some dialogue going with you guys. And again, those are on Instagram at Harvey's Huddle and on Twitter at Harvey_Huddle. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week of NFL football. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be an amazing week 11, I think. So take care. My name's Jackson Harvey. This has been Harvey's Huddle. Have a great weekend.